Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Maxed Out Parent, How to Protect Your Well-Being and Strategies to Ease Burnout. I'm Tara Clark, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. You may know me from Instagram's Modern Mom Probs, and I'm also the author of the book with the same name, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers. I want to take a second to thank House of Wise and Mother Honestly for putting together this summit today. I don't need to tell you that parents are burnt out. The last 18 months have been above and beyond anything that we could ever have imagined when we first had children. It's enough to bring anyone to tears, honestly. And for many parents, it did. And for many parents, they ran out of tears. They ran out of energy. They ran out of patience. And today I am joined by three powerhouse women, and I'm so excited to be able to introduce them to you right now. Adonica Shaw from the Wing Women, Tara LaRock from Mindful Mamas, and Soumya Dave, author and psychiatrist. Hello, ladies. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
So before we jump into our conversation, let's just do some quick introductions. Let's start with you, Adonica.
Hi, my name is Adonica, and I'm the founder of Wing Women, which is a health tech platform where women can give or get health advice from one another. They can find a patient advocate if they are in need of somebody to help them manage or better understand any personal health issue that they're going through, or at least in the future, be able to connect with a physician or doctor that specializes in an area of care that they would like more attention in. Aside from that, I'm a mom of three and the author of the book, Depressed to Daring. Most of my background has been in communications and marketing, but just due to my own health concerns as a mother and as a woman on the go, I quickly learned that I had to put my health and wellness first. And so from that space, Wing Women was born to make sure that busy moms, women who aren't yet moms or do not aspire to be moms, still had access to peer support and health information and health advice so that they could operate at their best at all times. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about Wing Women. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for the work that you do with Wing Women, because it's so important to get out in the community. And so thank you for that. Now we're going to jump to Tara LaRock. Tara, come on up. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. I'm Tara, and I am the founder and CEO of Mindful Mamas. We are a mindfulness and self-care app for moms and moms to be. And I have a background in psychology. I'm a licensed child, family, and school psychology. And it's just so wonderful to be here. I'm also a mom of two, and you got to enjoy a meditation from my co-founder earlier this morning, Karina. I saw a lot of comments that you loved her voice, which we do too. And if you want to listen to her more, she is on the app everywhere. So it's just so wonderful to be here today.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. She did have the most soothing voice. I want to bottle it up and keep it with me just to calm me down anytime that I need to be calmed down.
In some of our sleep meditations, they say, I have never heard the end of this because Karina she just puts me to sleep. It's so wonderful for those meditations. But yeah, I'm lucky that she's my co-founder because I get to have her on speed dial at any time. It's nice.
Love it. Soumya, let's jump over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Soumya Dave. I'm a psychiatrist, author, a contributor to NBC News about mental health topics. I have my own private practice in New York City, and I'm really passionate about seeing women in my private practice, and especially when it comes to different life transitions. I have a focus on women's mental health, so that includes everything from the perinatal period, postpartum, including times at postpartum when there's a lot of burnout and beyond. I'm also the author of 2 novels, Well-Behaved Indian Women and What a Happy Family, which cover mental health and family dynamics in immigrant families.
Excellent. I can't wait to read those. Those sound fantastic.
Thank you.
So let's jump into the questions. We're just going to jump right into it. Soumya, let's start with you. There was a moment last winter when the crisis really hit a tipping point, right? COVID was carrying the screams of frustrated parents everywhere, across the internet, in real life, anywhere that you could think of. Moms were finally raising their hands and saying, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I've just hit my point. So now here we are heading into fall again. And where are we in terms of parental burnout?
So what I've been seeing is that parental burnout has just been increasing. I think there was a point when we were starting the pandemic, I'd say about March 2020 for us in the United States, where we thought, how long is this going on? Is this going to be a few weeks? Is this going to be a few months? And I think we all have the capacity to handle that type of short-term stress and kind of show up. We see moms doing that all the time. They put everybody before themselves. They somehow come up with energy reserves they don't even have. And I would say at a certain point, probably about a year ago, people realized that they were running on surge capacity, that, we don't know how much longer this is going to go on, and we can't deal with this situation anymore. So I know the New York Times, I think it was around winter of last year, did a Primal Scream series where they had a voice line open for parents to call in and just let out a scream. But really, when we're talking about burnout, I like to think of it as a spectrum when we're also thinking about stress. So short-term stress is when we have factors, events, different things going on that might cause a heightened reaction and difficulty for us. And when that stress keeps going on and it's prolonged, we kind of go into the end of the spectrum where we see burnout. So when I see people who are stressed, they'll say, I have this adrenaline running, I might be having trouble sleeping, my thoughts are racing, I'm worried. But if they're also experiencing burnout, they may also say, I kind of feel numb. I feel a little detached to what's going on. I'm so overwhelmed that I sometimes don't even feel in my body. So I'm seeing more of that part of the spectrum as we go into the winter of this year. And again, that just emphasizes how important it is that we're here today and how grateful I am that we're having this discussion because parental burnout has just been on the rise, truly since last year.
It's absolutely true. What are some current drivers of burnout today? And then how can parents spot them? How can we tune in with ourselves enough to spot these are the symptoms that I'm having right now?
Sure. So in terms of drivers for burnout, there are so many systemic factors that lead to burnout. So one place I always like to start is when someone comes in and they say, well, I have my health and I have a family. I don't have anything to be burnt out about. So I think sometimes it's important to also tell ourselves that we have the right to have our feelings. It's valid to have the feelings that we have. And many of us are working at capacities that we've never had to work before. One big thing that's come up, of course, since we've been virtual in so many ways, is that a lot of our things that we used to have separation between our work, our home life, they're all happening in the same place. So it's very hard to unplug. It's very hard to set those boundaries. I've met parents who have said, oh, actually, sometimes on the commute, I would listen to something. I would listen to a podcast. I would let my mind go into a little bit of a different headspace. Or my spouse and I could get away for a little bit to just have a breather from all of this. So not being able to have a way to get out and then also having everything in one space just adds to that feeling of burnout and even that feeling of being very trapped. So that's definitely something that's quite important. And then when we don't know if there's an end date in sight. So a lot of times when we do have a stressor, we have a deadline, we have a big event, we might know when the end of that is. With the situation that we've all been in for almost 2 years, we don't know. And that prolonged sense of uncertainty is incredibly tough. It's incredibly tough. And when I think about symptoms and signs that maybe it's time to get some more support or at least dig into what's going on more, one big thing that comes up a lot are the cyclical thoughts. So a lot of times I like to say when I see people in my practice that we don't have to believe everything we think. We don't have to trust everything we think. But at the same time, our thoughts can tell us such important things. So if our thoughts are cycling, especially about certain topics over and over and over again, which we call ruminating, that can be a sign that we really might benefit from some additional support, whether that's taking out time for ourselves or going and seeking out a mental health provider. The second is also anger. I think anger is such an interesting emotion because a lot of times it's stigmatized. In women, especially, it comes with a lot of shame. But really, anger and irritability, they can be signs that we have really passed our breaking point and that we need more support. So a lot of times I will hear someone say, why am I such an angry mom? Why am I yelling? Why is my fuse so short with the people I love? I don't want to be this way. And I think it's so important to give ourselves grace and say, that anger is telling us something. Things have reached a point where this is not sustainable anymore. It's not actually the time for judgment, regardless of what we may have been taught. It's actually a time to look further in and see what we need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. It gives us so much to think about, right? And then to sort of check in on ourselves and say, like, do we have that short fuse? Like, are we there yet, or are we getting there?
Mm-hmm.
Adonica, let's jump over to you. You are at the forefront of mental health, especially for women of color.
Mhm.
How has the BIPOC community been affected emotionally, socially, mentally by this burnout?
Well, I have to tell you, the last 18, 19 months have been a whirl, not necessarily just for communities of color, but for everybody. But when you're looking at, and I won't say it's as recent, but if you think back to last summer, there was a lot of social unrest. There were people in the streets protesting. There were varying opinions and views that were coming out of the election cycle. There were people that were experiencing layers of microaggressions, both being partially either still in the workforce or transitioning into a home environment that they've had to deal with largely by themselves, particularly if they've been living in isolation during the pandemic and they were moved to their home environment, or even needing to be in an office and jumping in and out, still dealing with a very solitary experience of what it means to be a person of color, dealing with some of their own day-to-day experiences on top of a pandemic, a global pandemic, and issues that are arising from either job loss, feeling isolation, or dealing with mental health issues privately, and in some cases without any support or without mental health care or health care just in general. And then even on an emotional level, maybe not even having people in their closer circle or friends or family group that they could express some of what they're dealing with as well. I will say, just as a Black woman, there is a part of our identity that comes very much so from being strong, being the strong one, being the strong Black woman. And so during this pandemic, that has been pushed through into the max for many people of color, many African-American women as well, in that we've had to even look at that identity and figure out how much more can we take? How does it work? How are we going to alleviate some of the things that we're feeling, both in the workplace, at home, and at the time, if you were homeschooling children as well. And so I think for this community, it's been an interesting wave. I won't say that it is completely let up, even though the children are back in school. But I do hope to see, at least moving forward, some reprieve, particularly with spaces being able to open up again, and women and people being able to find opportunities to meet in person, go to counseling groups, or even jump into some therapy groups online if they've been fortunate enough to find some Zoom links that they can maybe talk about some of their feelings and what some of their experiences have been over these last 18, 19 months.
No, absolutely. So with your role in Wing Women, let's talk about the difference between being overwhelmed and being burnt out, right? Is it the same thing? Is there actually a distinct difference? Can you shed some light into that for us?
So there actually is a difference. So if you think about it, if you light a candle and it lights and it goes all the way down to the end, and there's a point at which you cannot relight it, it's burned out. So when we're talking about burnout, it's just the utter feeling of disengagement, of lack, of null, of lacklusterness. There's no spark or anything like that that helps that person keep going. Overwhelm, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's overexcitement. It's feeling overwhelmed, over anxious. It's feeling engaged in a way that if I continue to do X, Y, Z, it's all going to work out. When you're talking about burnout, the person's already beyond that. They're all the way to, it's not going to work out. It hasn't worked out. I'm done trying to make it work out. So that's, I would say, what that nuance is there. And so when we're talking about the two, I think it's important to distinguish them, because a person can be feeling overwhelmed about one thing, but be completely burned out about something else that's going on in their life. So for example, I can be overwhelmed with my workload, but be completely burned out as a parent trying to homeschool children in the middle of the day. That kind of a thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Thank you for differentiating that, because I even for myself, like I can identify, that now that you said it as two separate things. Like, yeah, some days I feel overwhelmed with what I have to do for work, and then other days you are just spent when it comes to being a parent. So
yes,
thank you for sharing that. I don't know, Samia, if you want to add on to that at all.
Oh, I totally agree. I think you said that so well. And I loved the metaphor with the candle, because it just applied so beautifully. But I say actually something very similar, that burnout feels like you just don't have a lot. So there's a lot of detachment that can come. There's a lot of numbing, and also some things that may have helped you before when you weren't burnt out. If there were certain things that gave you joy or filled you up, they might not actually be as effective anymore, or effective at all, because really there is this sense of complete depletion. And it's likely been going on for so long that we're past the point of one overwhelming situation or circumstance.
Right. Absolutely. So Tara, I'm going to pose my next question to you. Moms have a tendency to take on all the things, right? We are managing all aspects of our lives, of our children's lives, maybe our partner's lives, and we feel burnt out and we feel overwhelmed, right?
We do.
What are some steps that we can take to reduce the feeling of having to do it all?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because, I mean, first of all, we cannot do it all. We are realizing that, even though we still continue to try and it fails us time and time again. There is a statistic that I learned that just floored me, but a new mom gets about 17 minutes to herself every single day. 17 minutes. And so it is so important that we weave in, I like to call them little sips of self-care throughout the day, instead of leaving it for the end of the day when we're already so tired. And a lot of women and mothers, just in their nature, they'll take those 17 minutes that is supposed to be so precious for themselves, and they'll give it to someone else. And so I really love the idea of thinking about work and life as a spectrum, and it's an integration. And sometimes you're closer to work or home, other times you're over here, but try not to force yourself to be in the middle can really help with that pressure of finding balance, and also with mom guilt. And I don't want to say it too loud, because I feel like she's always listening, waiting for an invitation to come in. And it's just it's just part of life. Work is part of life. Parenting is part of life. Doing your chores is part of life. And so one thing that I love to do is, when I'm thinking about my to-do list, which sometimes I don't feel like I have a lot of control over, I think about what I do have control over, and that's how I want to be when I'm doing my list. And so I'll oftentimes just write down, when I'm doing my laundry, I just will make a mental note. I want to be grateful for the memories of like folding these tiny little things that may not fit my son who's about to be 3 anymore. Or I can take a shower and have a profound experience of self-care and just thank my body for doing all of the things that I just got done, and allowing myself that permission to bask in my own greatness. And at first it feels really weird to pepper in these moments of pause and intentionality, but then they start to become a part of your process. And now I no longer take my first sip of my coffee in the morning on autopilot. I sit there and I feel my feet on the ground, and I smell the aroma, that's coming from my coffee. And I look out and I just am so grateful for my kids, even if they're screaming at the table about how they don't want oatmeal and I do not want to make them a second breakfast. It's still just that moment for me that I'm like, wow, I get to parent this, even though it's a mess a lot of the times. It's just really those sips of self-care that can turn the mundane into magic.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that. And tomorrow morning, on Saturday morning, when I have my first cup of coffee, I'm going to take a second and really try to like sniff it and really experience it. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Meanwhile, while my kid's like, I need Cheerios or whatever it happens
Yeah,
to.
let me know how it goes.
I will. I'll report back on that one.
Great.
So for modern parents, like I said, we take on so many things, right? We're taking on work, we're taking on household things. How can parents ask for support from maybe their parents, other extended family, employers, friends, without feeling exposed or incapable of doing our job?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because, and I'm still working through this too. A lot of the times, what's best for you does not feel good to ask for, especially when you are used to people pleasing or showing up in a certain way or feeling like it's going to make you exposed or vulnerable, and that's not a practice that you're typically used to or feeling you're used to working with. And so, you know, we were talking a little bit on the backstage. There's this saying that I love: if you can name it, you can tame it. And so naming that it's going to feel uncomfortable and that practice makes progress. And so practicing it beforehand, really identifying what it is you need and what is the intention behind it and how do you want to communicate it. If you want to go with vulnerability, go with vulnerability. That's wonderful. If you want to say it just matter of fact, say it matter of fact and see how that feels. And just going into it knowing that it might not feel good because you might be somebody that is really perceptive in their reaction and their emotions, then kind of blur the lines. And I know we heard a little bit of Dr. Becky talking about it earlier today with setting boundaries, but that's always helped me. I don't anticipate that it's going to feel great in the moment to ask for what I need with my partner, or even with my kids, with my coworkers, with people that are helping to grow Mindful Mamas. But I know that sitting with that not goodness is a step because it will get easier. At least I hope, right? At least I really do hope. And it does in some circumstances. And other times it feels really crappy again because you don't want to let the people around you down. But what I've learned just with my struggles with postpartum depression and OCD and my own mental health issues is that I didn't ask for help. And there are outcomes of that. And if I can say anything to anybody, it's just always encouraging them, no matter how scary it feels or how vulnerable or exposed they feel. Asking for help is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness, and no one can do it alone. And we have to be able to create those safe spaces for women and women in the workplace to have these really tough conversations and get their needs met.
Absolutely. We are stronger together. All of us here are strong. That's what this entire summit is about, right? That we are stronger together. So thank you for saying that. Tara, you mentioned Mindful Mamas, which is your company. And Mindful Mamas creates a space for moms to clear their heads and to connect with themselves. How has Mindful Mamas addressed burnout during the last 18 months?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we launched on the App Store the same day that the governor here in Denver, where we're based, put us in the stay-at-home order. And launching a business like into the pandemic was one of the scariest things as a founder and as a businesswoman that I could have ever experienced. But the timing really couldn't have been any better because I felt like moms were looking for a place that was a virtual sanctuary because they weren't able to get those connections outside of their home. And, you know, that makes my whole team feel really proud that we were able to create this resource without even knowing what was going to happen and hold these moms in the chaos and in the mess and in the overwhelm and sometimes, you know, in the beauty too. You know, I'm a huge believer that mindfulness and meditation is really not about stopping your thoughts. It's about seeing your thoughts and choosing which ones you want to ride on and ride that train all the way down, you know, as far as you want, and which ones you kind of want to hop off that train and say, hey, you know, I see you. You know, for me, having postpartum depression and OCD and then telling myself I was going to learn how to meditate. I thought you were just nuts. And I even knew the science because of my background of being a psychologist. But that skill to say like, oh, hi, scary thought. Like, I see you, but thanks for letting me know that could happen. But I'm good now. It unlocked life for me. It gave me my power back. And so being able to teach that is just such a gift. Being able to say things and know that moms around the world are hearing, like, all of you gets to be here. You are a good mom. Yeah, feeling that way is normal. We have women say they just go on the app and they look at the titles, and the fact that there's a meditation that's titled that is all they need. Sometimes they don't even listen to the practice because they're like, wow, if that's a title, then it must be, big enough to create content around. And it's so powerful to give people permission to go from, I can't rest, I can't stop, to I can rest, I am resting. I can do this, I am doing this. And that's just been the biggest privilege of all, is to bring psychoeducation and awareness into the state of affairs for moms, and to be in the middle of a societal and political awakening that finally moms and families matter. And Mindful Mamas solves a little part, but all the other companies solve another part and another part. And it's just so wonderful to see the collective come together for the greater mission of supporting moms.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for the work that you do there. It's so important. All of the work that all three of you do is so important. We're going to do a round robin really fast. Okay. You guys ready?
Okay.
We're going to go around, and I'm going to ask you one strategy that you can share with everyone out there about easing burnout. I'm going to start with Adonica. Adonica, go. What's your one strategy?
So the one thing for me is to schedule in my time with myself instead of waiting to find time. Honestly, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was horrible about this because my schedule would be back to back with board meetings and commitments and committee meetings and all of this, that, and the third. And so I would always just live in this cycle of not needing to have me time where I recharge. I will say, though, that during the pandemic, I've learned how to recharge just by being alone and making sure that I've got that time carved out on my calendar. And so instead of trying to find time, I will go through my calendar on a weekly basis and say 2 to 3 on this day is mine, where I can go to the gym, I can work out, I can read, I can jump into an app and do meditation. But scheduling myself in there just as well as I would another meeting, a commitment, or check up with anybody that I'm working with at the time.
That's so important. I'm going to put that in my calendar to remind myself to do the same thing. Samia, what is your one strategy to ease burnout?
So I went through my calendar as well. I love that Adonica said that, because that's the kind of method that vibes with me. And I actually went through and said, where can I do less? Where can I actually slack? Because I had internalized this belief probably many years before I became a mom, but that I just had to do everything and I had to do it to the nth degree. And if I wasn't, then I was failing. So I had to learn to go through task by task and say, what absolutely can be left to another day, another week, another month, to never, what isn't essential. And in doing that, I also learned from my friend and colleague Pooja Lakshmin how to make guilt like a white noise machine, like the white noise machine that's in my son's bedroom. But it can just be background noise. It doesn't have to be my compass. So when I was going through my calendar, I thought when guilt comes up, it's just going to be this humming sound that I can acknowledge. I love that Tara said that about our thoughts being that way as well, and our emotions. But I had to do that with guilt in order to complete that exercise.
I love that analogy. So far, we've not invited mom guilt here. She's not invited to the summit. Mom guilt, stay out. You are locked out. You are not here. And that she's just background noise. So I love that both ways. Tara, what is your one strategy for burnout?
Oh, I think there's been so many tips given already that I would love to say, the scheduling time, really understanding that that all of your emotions and all of those feelings are allowed to be there, but it doesn't mean you need to pay attention to them. One thing that I like to do at the end of the day is I like to do reflection and to really look back at my calendar if it was a busy work day and say, you know, I'm proud of you, or like, wow, I got that done. Just really reflecting on that helps me to not get caught up in the you know, the hamster wheel of, well, what's tomorrow, and already jumping tomorrow, and taking that moment to really reflect on what did I accomplish, how did I feel, you know, what went well, what didn't, what can I adjust, and where can I adjust it. I also feel like doing that on the weekends too, and setting an intention, if your intention is to really be present and to rest, and at the end of the day thinking back, like, you know, did I follow through with that intention? Like, let me try to think of 3 moments, even if they were 3 seconds long, that I was present with my kids. And that little bits of success, they start to add up, and they start to paint a whole different picture of, instead of feeling this lack and this scarcity of what you didn't get done and what still needs to be done, you can look at it through a lens of abundance. And that's so helpful with mindset.
That's a beautiful perspective shift. I think that's so, so important to have a perspective shift. We have a question from the audience. I'm going to pose this to Adonica. How do you ask for help when your friends and family are not multiracial and don't understand your unique challenges, or they judge your parenting styles?
Judging of the parenting styles. Like, been there, done that, have the button, the hat, and the shirt to prove it, girl. So it's something I think that honestly women deal with across the board, multiracial or not. I will say for me, it was a journey. I think somebody mentioned it a little bit earlier, had the people pleasings where I wanted to be the best mom and I wanted to do all of the things that were done for me and show up the way that I had been parented, or seen other women in my sphere and in my community show up as mothers. And then I think I got to this point, and I'm 36 now, but when I think I hit that mid 30s, maybe a couple of years ago, I got at this point, I'm like, I have to just define what parenting is going to look like for me. And I have to stand by that and love myself enough to know that all of the people that have poured into me give me this unique experience to show up for my children and do things the way that I think that they need to be done. The people that have come before me got their opportunity. And so if I'm not careful, I'm going to give up my opportunity to mother and to be there for my children the way that reflects who I am and my life experiences. And so to answer your question, if there's anything I can impart upon you, it is to know who you are, stand firm in that, and to know that your children's experience with you needs to be based off of who you are. And so if there are judgmental people around you, you are going to have to set some boundaries. And by boundaries, you can not ask for certain advice from them, or you can learn to manage their opinions as they arise. But ultimately, I think it's a game of learning self and respecting and self-advocating for your own experiences and the way that you want your children to know who you are as their parent.
So beautifully said. So beautifully said. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you to the House of Wise and to Mother Honestly for organizing this summit and for having us here. Adonica Shaw, Samia Dave, and Tara LaRock, thank you all for being here and sharing your insights and experience with us.